So the funniest thing is that they don't even really give a what they buy. They pretty much buy anything because they need the volume. Hey, what's up, guys? I wanted to chat with you a little bit about the right types of aged leads to buy. If you're an aged solar lead buyer, if you're not an aged solar lead buyer, you're missing out on a really good opportunity here to get really, really affordable leads that are actually that have a high, level of intent. It really is one of the smartest ways to get started, and one of the smartest ways to keep going. Like I see some of the biggest call center operators are doing this now, and they're not beginners by any stretch. I deal with some really, really big clients that are spending five, $10,000 every single week. So, what are the best types of leads for you to get started with? Now, there's always two different types of leads out there. Not every data provider is going to carry both. The more reputable ones should, but you want to be you want to be looking for ones that have a decent selection of a couple different options. And what I mean by a couple different options is there's the stuff that generally costs like, over a buck, and then there's the stuff that costs less, like usually under 50 cents. Like with us, our stuff that we carry, our standard leads are the cheaper ones. And those are anywhere from 5 cents to the most is 33 cents per record. That's the cheap. That's what we call the standard data. The premium stuff is anywhere from 99 cents to 3.99. So still very, very inexpensive, but definitely costs more, right? So then the question is like, well, what's the right stuff for me? And whenever I'm talking with a potential client, the first thing I always ask them is like, well, hey, who's going to be calling these leads, right? So I want to know really like, is it an overseas call center with agents? Or is it you yourself or someone really based here in the United States? Really, what it comes down to is really US versus overseas. That's really the big determining factor. And to make this really, really short and kind of skip to the right, just get right to the point, overseas agents should be calling the cheap stuff, and US agents should be calling the premium stuff. And I'll tell you why. I mean, it's really, really simple because, overseas agents, number one, they're used to it, right? Like they're used to calling the really cheap data. So like it's not gonna ruin their day. Like they're just, they're totally used to that. They would expect nothing else. And that's what you're paying them to do. Like you're paying them, cheap hourly rate wages in order to, find the needle in the haystack, proverbially speaking, if I can speak today. So that's what you're paying them to do. So that's what they should be doing. And they're used to it, right? Like that's what they're used to doing. I mean, they're used to cold calling, right? So this is an improved version of cold calling, in fact. And I always tell that to people like, this is, take all the same practices that you know about cold calling and apply it to age solar leads, and you'll do great because it really is the exact same practice, just with better quality data. That's it. No difference, right? So, all right, back to what I was saying. So, if you're an overseas call center, you should definitely be looking at the cheap stuff. There's no reason to give overseas agents really, really expensive data. It just doesn't make sense. And they're probably going to burn through a lot of those leads anyway. So, I kind of don't like that. And it kind of doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So, for that reason, a lot of my, bigger call center operators, they're actually usually buying just the cheap 5 cent records. In fact, that's what we do because we run a call center as well, for our clients who want to buy appointments from us. We're just using the 5 cent data and it works great. But you have to be set up for that, right? You have to have overseas agents, you have to be using predictive dialers. Otherwise, it just doesn't make sense because if you're using US based agents, and they're not, or if you yourself, let's say, if you yourself are going to be calling these leads, stay away from the cheap stuff. Really, really bad idea. And I'm not just saying that as because of a sales guy, but like it's a really, really bad idea because number one, you probably don't have a predictive dialer, meaning it's a multi-line dialer, so it can call multiple lines all at once. Like we're using, we're using a pretty powerful dialer that's calling up to 15 to 20 lines at once. Now we don't always do that, but it has the capability to do it. So they have to be able to call that many lines all at once so that they can call through large numbers of this lower quality data so they can find the needle in the haystack, right? So that's the only way that they can do it. So that's why I'm saying like stick with the cheap stuff if you're using overseas agents. Now, flip side of that coin, what if you're a US based company and you've got callers there that work in your office, or let's say you yourself are going to be calling these leads. then without a question, you should avoid the cheap stuff and you should stick with the better quality stuff. Now, you don't have to go with the most expensive one. That's not what I'm telling you. I don't think you necessarily need to buy the most expensive data, whether it's from our company or from any other company out there. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying you should buy more accurate data, which tends to be the premium stuff. And the reason is maybe you're not using a predictive dialer. And if you're not, you should anyway. And even if you are using a predictive, by the way, I still don't recommend calling the cheap stuff. It's just you're going to spend too much time sitting on dead air calls, right? Because the data isn't as accurate as the more premium stuff. And you only have so much time in the day, right? Like if you yourself are going to be calling these leads, you need to preserve some time, at least half of your day, to be closing deals and doing other work related things. You can't devote all day to it. But that's precisely what you're paying overseas call center agents to do, is to call all day, right? So they have the ability to be calling that cheaper data. So if you yourself are going to be calling these leads, or you've got US based agents, whether they work there in your office or they're remote, whatever, but they're US based, you want to stick with better quality data. And the reasons are whether you do or do not have a predictive value isn't really the defining line, but really it's just the quality of the data and how much time they're going to be spending listening to dead air, right? If they're calling the cheap stuff that's more inaccurate, this is going to be a lot of time on dead air calls. And the fact of the matter is if you have good quality US based agents, you don't want to lose them because they're not easy to find. Hiring overseas agents, it still sucks. You don't want to lose them either, but it's easier to replace them. There's more of them. There's a larger pool of candidates to choose from versus in the US, it's a much smaller pool of good candidates. So you really want to protect them and you really want to you want to keep them. So don't feed them junk, guys. Don't make that mistake. Send them the better quality data. They'll more than make up for it in productivity and good quality appointments for you. So now, with that said, I often get asked, like, what are the best age groups to buy, right? Like, what's the best age groups to buy? Most aged solar dealers or distributors rather will carry typically 4 different age groups. Everyone's a little bit different. Some companies will break it down a little differently. Us, SolarWise, the way that way ours is broken down is it's 7 to 30 days aged. The next would be 31 to 90, 91 to 180, 180 to 365. Okay. Um, Now, what everyone always asks, which one should I buy? And I have 2 different suggestions for you. And it's the same. No, I take that back. It's different depending on if you're buying the standard versus if you're buying the premium. So let's start with the premium. Let's say you're a US based company or that you yourself are going to be calling these leads. So let's talk about you first. All right. So if you yourself are going to be calling these leads, I actually don't recommend the newest and I don't recommend the oldest. I like the stuff in the middle. Okay. And I'll tell you why. So I don't like the oldest stuff for the main reason that it's just too old. I just don't see the point in it. Like if you're going to do that, then you actually probably should just get the cheaper standard stuff. It's just a little bit too old, and I don't think it's worth the 99 cents. I honestly don't. And I don't like the newest stuff for a couple of different reasons. Number one, all the rookies buy it. All the rookies think that it's the best, so they all buy it. And it was the best until they all bought it. They kind of all ruined it, right? So all the rookies buy up the 7 to 30 because they think it's the best. And then so those leads are getting called a lot, right? So that's just the nature of the game. So they're getting badgered and they're getting annoyed. And the fact of the matter is that if they ended up on an age solar lead list, it's because they filled out a long form, online long form somewhere, which means they filled out an ad, which means if they clicked on one solar ad, then they got fed 1,000 other solar ads just like it. And everyone wants to get 3 quotes. So you can almost guarantee that they're getting hit up by a lot of different solar companies all at once. So that's one of the reasons why I don't like the freshest ones is they're just getting it badgered with a lot of phone calls right now. And you're going to get some angry people going, great, another solar guy calling. So I don't like that at all. Okay. Number 2, they may be getting multiple quotes because maybe they're talking to a bunch of different solar companies now. So you're just going to be, competing against a bunch of other solar companies and having to lower your price. So no one wants that. That's annoying. And then number 3, the other reason why I'm not a huge fan of the freshest ones is they're not really that educated yet. They're pretty fresh in their solar education journey, and they haven't learned really enough to make a really strong decision yet. So um, they're not ready to pull the trigger. They're just still kind of kicking the tires. So that's why I like the middle ones, the 31 to 90 and the 91 to 180, because the dust has settled. They're not getting badgered as much. They're probably not price, comparison shopping this much at all anymore. They may have actually just kind of given up because they got annoyed by all the phone calls. So now they're really not getting annoyed that much anymore. So a lot of the dust has settled. And on top of that, now they're more likely to have already done a lot of research at this point, and they're more likely to ready to make it. They're more likely to, you think you know what I'm saying. They're more likely to be, there we go. They're more likely to be ready to make a decision. I knew I'd get there eventually. Okay. They're more likely to be ready to make a decision. So that's why I like the 31 to 90 and the 91 to 180. Now, a lot of people say, Peter, tell me which one to buy. Okay, if you put a gun to my head, I guess I would, by a small margin, I would say the 31 to 90 by a small margin. It's not a major, don't debilitate yourself sitting here debating back and forth as to which one you should get. It's not that big of a deal. It's kind of splitting hairs, to be honest with you. The other thing I always tell people, you can try one and then try the other. And it kind of is random, honestly. Sometimes, like you'll notice that, some batches you might do better with the fresher, and then the next batch you might do better with the older, and then it might switch. So it is a little bit random. So, and the other thing is you kind of have to be a little bit flexible, because if you're somewhat of a large volume buyer, or you live in an area where there's just not a lot of data to begin with, we may run out of the ones that you prefer. In fact, everyone might run out of the stuff that you prefer. So just be prepared to be a little bit flexible, so that, if we run out of the 31 to 90s, be okay to pivot and get the 91 to 180s. Like I said, they're super close. Okay. So now let's switch sides. Let's say you're a call center overseas, right? Small or large, doesn't really matter. Um, I like the nickel data. I like the oldest one, the 180 to 365. We've always really done well with that. And I would say that um I'll leave you with kind of an interesting thought, but I would say at least half of our more sophisticated call center operators, they also kind of prefer the nickel data. That's usually all they even really buy, unless if we run out. If we run out, then they'll get, maybe the one above it, something like that, right? Just to keep things going, because they don't want to shut down. So that's what most of them tend to get. They tend to avoid most of that fresher stuff. So it's kind of interesting. We don't really sell a whole ton of it, but not that there's anything wrong with it. That's just not what they buy. That's most of the call center operators. Now, what's interesting is, I'll leave you with this final thought. The most sophisticated call center operators that we work with, the really, really big ones, the ones that are spending 5 to 10 K every single month, or every single week, sorry, they don't give a rat's ass what they buy. They buy anything and everything, standard, premium, fresh, old, you name it, everything in between. They buy it all, because they're smart enough to have figured out that their cost per appointment comes out to be almost the same no matter what the hell they buy. So they have figured out that for them, and the really sophisticated guys are, they're good for a reason. They've been doing it for a long time. They've got a really, well-built operation going. They're getting a cost per appointment probably somewhere to the tune of 15 to $25, per solar appointment. So they're killing it for sure. And they have learned that it almost doesn't matter what they buy. They're going to end up with roughly the same cost per appointment anyway, because it all balances out, right? It's like, if you buy the cheap data, well, then you got to get more agents to call them, who end up using up more dialer minutes, who end up needing more management. So they need more managers to manage them. You need more hosting, and you need more bandwidth to cover all that, all that extra, all the bandwidth that you're using in order to make all those extra calls. You need more DIDs. So it's offset. And now flip the coin the other way around. If you buy the most expensive data, okay, well, now you need less DIDs, less agents, less management, less hosting, less server space, less minutes, all the stuff, right? So at the end of the day, it all kind of balances itself out. So ultimately speaking, I hope this helps you guys. To summarize it all, if you're overseas call center, start with the nickel data, start there, and then eventually don't care, because your cost per appointment is going to be the same. So just try it all out, right? And if you're US based, avoid the cheap stuff, avoid the standard stuff, only get the premium stuff, because you don't want to waste your agent's time. You don't want them quitting. And stick with that middle stuff. Avoid the freshies, avoid the really old crusty ones, stick with the ones in the middle. All right, guys, I hope this helps.